Hello and welcome to another video from elttraining.com. I'm Jo Gakonga and this video is the start of a series on classroom management. This one's about teacher talk. Don't forget, if you like this, there are lots of other videos on the site and there's also a Grammar for Language Teachers course. Okay, so let's make a start. So classroom management isn't about what you teach, it's about how you teach. And I think the first thing that I want to say is that if you're a teacher, it's really important, I think, to be enthusiastic about your subject and your learners and to be engaging. If the learners are engaged, they're likely to learn something. If they're not, they can't learn anything, is my feeling. So I think this is a really important starting point when you're thinking about classroom management. Class management, of course, is split into different parts. We're going to look at teacher talk and language grading today, but you could also think about giving clear instructions, setting up activities and running them, and giving feedback effectively. And we'll look at all these in different videos coming up soon. But today, teacher talk and language grading. So there are some potential different problems with teacher talk. I think there are two potential problems. One is the quantity of talk in the classroom, and the other is the level. So let's start by talking about the quantity. Now, teacher talk isn't a sin. Teacher talk can be really important for language input and for listening practice. It's likely that the most listening practice that learners will get in a class is listening to you talking. So it is important, it does have a place. Don't feel that it's a sin and you cannot talk, because of course it's important. But there's a balance to be had between teacher talk and learner talk. And it's not necessarily even either, that's just a nice picture. So if you do this to your learners, what is likely to happen is this: they'll all go to sleep. And even if you are enthusiastic and engaging in a sort of a lecturing style, this isn't going to help them learn English, because learning a language is a practical skill. In the same way that swimming is a practical skill, you have to get into the pool and do it. So it really is important that there's lots of learner talk. They have to actually do. They have to actually participate. I think that problems often arise because of nerves, especially for trainee teachers. If you're in front of people and you're feeling a bit nervous, what you're likely to do is talk, and that can be a problem. So TTT is something that trainers might often talk about, and this stands for teacher talk time or too much teacher talk, one or the other. Let's have a look at a couple of situations and see what might be happening. Look at this. I hate it when there's a silence in the class. If no one's speaking, I usually open my mouth. I figure it's probably good for them to have some more listening practice anyway. Well, it might be, but I think the problem here is this fear of an awkward silence in the class. This is not to be feared. It might be that learners are actually thinking and figuring something out. This can be a particular problem at the beginning of classes. When you first stand up, they're looking expectantly at you and you talk. What would be better would be to give them something to do. Set up a pair work activity immediately. Get them talking. This will give you a chance to take a deep breath and relax a little bit and get your thoughts straight. So that would be a good idea, rather than you keep talking. Here's another situation that happens frequently for trainees. Something of this nature. Now I'll just rub this off the board, then we'll get on with the next exercise. Oh, where's the board rubber? Oh, yes, here, right. I'll just give out these sheets. I want to put them on different coloured paper, but there wasn't any in the cupboard, unfortunately. Still, not very important. So have a look at these. This is what we call commentating. People tend to narrate what they're doing, especially, as you say, when they're nervous and there's a bit of a gap in the class. There's a simple answer to this, and that's don't do it. It really, especially with low-level classes, it's very difficult because if they're confronted with a lot of language like that, they probably don't understand and it's confusing. So try to curtail that if you can. Here's another thing that often happens. Could I have your attention? Thanks. Right, if you're ready and it's not too much trouble, could you possibly find your books in your bag and open them up to page 56, please? If you're standing up in front of a group who you're not very familiar with and you're being watched and you're in a formal situation, your instinct will be to be polite. And what happens in English generally is that if we're polite, we use more language. And so this happens. What would be better? Page 56, please. And show them, demonstrate. So at lower levels particularly, it's really important to be clear and brief and give a demonstration. And that will give an idea. You can use please, you can be polite, your intonation can show that you're being polite and friendly. You don't need to do it by using a lot of language, so be careful of that. So we looked at quantity. How about level? Here are some other problems to think about. So what's wrong with this? Are you all in possession of a pen? Good. In that case, could you confer with your neighbour and jointly reach a consensus on the answers and then compile a list? Well, clearly, at lower levels particularly, but even at higher levels probably, this is going to be really difficult because you've got much too much difficult lexis in here. The level, what we call the language grading, is just too high. So you need to be careful about using low frequency, high register vocabulary. That's one thing. It can happen in other ways too, though. Have a look at this. Jot down a few ideas that you've come up with and then we'll look over them together. So if you look at that, there are no very difficult words. There are no very long words. But look at these phrasal verbs. Jot down, come up with, look over. Although these words are short, together, because they know what come means and up and with, does not mean that they understand come up with. They probably don't. So this is something else to be really careful of. It's an easy trap to fall into because instinctively you feel you're using short words, but you're still using difficult things because phrasal verbs are very, very common in unspoken language. Here's another way in which level can be a problem. Have a look at this. What's wrong with this? Had you not started learning English, what other language would you have chosen? Okay, so here the problem is not lexis, it's the level of grammar. The grammatical structures here are really difficult. So that's something to be aware of too, that it's not just about the lexis you use needs to be simple, but also about grammatical structures. Even using something like this, hypotheticals can be difficult at lower levels. If they hear stopped, they're going to imagine it's in the past, but it isn't clearly. So better would be something like, you're a pilot, your engines stop, what do you do? Avoid hypotheticals, particularly at lower levels. It will make it easier for them to understand if you keep it concrete. This is another problem on the opposite end of the spectrum. You, last night, go out with who? You see that your low-level learners are struggling to understand you and you start to speak in pidgin English. Don't. They need a natural model. They need you to speak a little bit more slowly than you would normally. They need you to use simple lexis and simple structures, and in that way they'll understand, but they'll also get a good natural model which will stand them in good stead as they go further through the language. So of course, at different levels you're going to grade your language differently. Do you need to grade your language at all levels? Well, no, not really. So the question is, how much is appropriate? Clearly, at very low levels, you need to grade your language quite a lot. You're going to need to make sure that you are speaking more slowly and that you're using simple language. But as you go up the levels, you're going to need to give them a more authentic model, and so definitely you shouldn't be grading your language very much. However, even at higher levels, you might notice that you're speaking not quite in the way that you would speak to your native speaker friends on a Saturday night, for example. Solutions to this, it is a problem because I think particularly if you're nervous, particularly if you're not used to speaking in this sort of situation, it is easy to speak too much, speak too quickly, use vocabulary that's going to be difficult for them. It's a good idea to plan what you want to say. You might even want to write it down. I'm not suggesting, please be clear about this, I'm not suggesting that you read out what you're going to say to them in the class, but I think the act of writing it down before class can help you to see how much extraneous language you're using, how much difficult language you're using. And I think that if you practice it a bit, in front of a mirror, in front of other people in your family or whatever, that can really help. It's also a good idea to record yourself and listen back to what you're going to say or what you said in class. So this could be recording in the class and listening back afterwards to see how it sounded, or out of class beforehand perhaps. I think this is really helpful because you don't really realise what you're saying when you're saying it necessarily. It is easier if you're listening back to it, and it will give you a great insight into what you sound like and how you're saying things. So, good luck with it. I hope it goes really well, and look out for the rest of the videos in this series. See you soon. Thanks very much. Bye-bye.